What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode 25, and this is our round 10 review episode. This week's episode, we'll be quickly running through the latest news to start with. We'll then have a look at all of my tips from round 10 and how they went, and then we'll wrap up the episode looking at each of the 9 matches played throughout the weekend. Before we jump into all of that, though, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, all of that fun stuff. Whether you're watching this on Spotify or YouTube, every interaction helps, so keep it going. Also, don't forget to follow me and check out all of my other social media stuff. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, we've got Facebook, we've got TikTok. I'm posting a lot of other stuff on those things, which is mainly like my vote leaders each week, team of the week each week, my power rankings, all of that sort of stuff goes onto those social media accounts, so go check me out there. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this episode. Latest news, I guess the big story of the week, big-ish story of the week, Sydney, they're clear on top. They're absolutely cruising. They have zero issues. Second on the ladder, all of a sudden, the Bombers are up there. Who saw that coming at the start of the year? Not many. I mean, granted, they were 5th on the ladder after round 17 last year, so maybe we should have expected more from them, but they're going very well. A few teams falling quickly. Carlton struggling, Melbourne struggling, Port Adelaide just surviving. So it's tough to read what's happening. I see the situation of basically the AFL right now. We've got the top team is Sydney. Granted, they've had a very good run with injuries and their midfield is flying. Then it's about 15 teams, bang, 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 bang. Anyone can beat anyone. Actually, probably 16 teams. Pretty much all teams are capable. Actually, 15, because Richmond can't at the moment. Those 15 teams are all very even. It's all about having the right ground and no injuries, basically. Determines whether you win or not. Obviously, there's more to it than just that, but like anyone can beat anyone in that. And then there's the bottom 2 teams, which Richmond, heavily injured at the moment. If they weren't as badly injured, they'd be on the bottom end of the ladder anyway, but I think they would be capable of at least being competitive against a lot of these teams. And then, obviously, North Melbourne sitting at the bottom, yet to win a game. So that's how I see it. Top 1 team, 15 others, bottom 2. So any team can really finish in that top 8 from those teams, based on what I've seen. I think maybe like West Coast is probably a couple years away, maybe next year. That's not quite there, but they are capable of beating anyone on the right week. So we'll jump from that and have a look at how my tips went on this weekend. We led off on Friday night with a stinking result from me. Gold Coast got the job done on Geelong, so I got that one wrong. Looking back, that was a bad tip from me. Gold Coast a week up there to acclimatise. They haven't lost at TAO in Darwin, and Geelong are just struggling. That's 3 losses in a row. It's not the end of the world, because obviously they won their first 7, so it's not all doom and gloom for them, but they will be certainly looking to turn that around soon. Sydney, I got that one right over Carlton. They won by a lot more than I expected, but they were very good. Collingwood got over the line just over Adelaide. GWS were a bit disappointing. They're struggling as well. Another team that's kind of on that downward spiral at the moment. The Bulldogs got that win over there. St Kilda couldn't win at Marvel. Fremantle don't tend to do too well in Victoria, but they got the job done over St Kilda, which is suggesting St Kilda maybe have panic signs at the moment. If I was in the St Kilda change rooms, there must be something going on, because The team's struggling a fair bit at the moment. Brisbane absolutely demolished Richmond. My margin was pretty close. Ended up being 119 points. Essendon, another one reasonably close in the margin. Essendon took care of North Melbourne by about 40, I think. Port Adelaide only just snuck over the line after trailing all day against the Hawthorn Hawks. So I got that one right. And then finished with getting the last game wrong. Melbourne didn't manage to beat West Coast. So I went 5 of 9, which puts me at 59 out of 90, which is dropping a little bit. We need to kind of turn it around. We've had a couple bad weeks in a row. But hopefully we can turn that around in the coming weeks. So first game of the weekend was Gold Coast versus Geelong up in Darwin, and to be honest, this game did not go how I really foresaw it going. Gold Coast absolutely demolished them, kicking 26 goals 8, 164. Geelong made it to 100 and lost by over 10 goals, which is insane. They kicked 15, 10, 100. Just after quarter time, Gold Coast pretty much convincingly won the rest of the game. Geelong did win the first quarter, but after that, and overall throughout the game, it probably felt like Gold Coast were always comfortable enough in this game. Obviously, massively high-scoring game for both teams. Both teams not super well known for being defensive, but certainly not bad defensively. But this game just opened up. Gold Coast just tore Geelong to pieces and converted their chances. 26 goals, 8 is very accurate kicking, and that probably helped them. Both teams tended to handball a bit more than normal. Maybe that's due to the conditions up in Darwin, a little bit slicker of a game. So maybe that was a potential reason for that. Gold Coast had a huge amount of the ball, 436 disposals. Accuracy for both teams was pretty solid, like 15-10 for Geelong's pretty good as well. What else was a major factor in this game? Clearances were pretty even across the board for both teams, which is a little surprising. Geelong actually won clearance count, which Gold Coast so far this year had been the better clearance team out of these two, but Geelong held their own in that regard. But then getting the ball inside 50, Gold Coast managed 73 inside 50s, which is a very high number, and plus 17. So they are typically very good at getting into inside 50 as well. They're ranked 4th coming into this game, where Geelong are 9th, and that kind of showed. But the conversion when going inside 50 was also pretty massive from Gold Coast. I mean, 73 inside 50s, you want to score quite a bit, but 26 goals is pretty solid. Like, you can't complain with kicking 26 goals no matter what, really, can you? That's how I see the game. Tackle count also was dominated by Gold Coast. Sorry, they won that by 14, which both teams are very similar in that regard coming into the game. So that was probably a key reason to this game and why Gold Coast looked the better team on the day. Mac Andrew was subbed off injured, which a bit disappointing for him. What else have we got? Noah Anderson, 42 touches, huge performance from him. Sam Flanders was very good. He had 37. Matt Rao, 35, 10 tackles. He's always huge. We had a couple big goal kickers, obviously, with Gold Coast kicking 26 goals. You'd expect that a few people would kick a few. Lukosius kicked 5. He also had 5 goal assists. And Bailey Humphrey also kicked 5. Ben King kicked 4. Meanwhile, over on Geelong's side of the fence, Max Holmes was probably their best player. He had 32 touches, 7 clearances. Myers was good. He's been very good actually. He's getting a lot more of the ball, which is only beneficial for them, but it didn't end up helping them too much in this game, obviously. Yeah, outside of that, I don't know. They were a long way off in most facets of the game, and that kind of showed on the scoreboard and on the stat sheet. Yeah, Gold Coast, they're cruising. They haven't lost a home match this year across the games at Gold Coast and Darwin, and if you don't lose at home, you're going to probably win enough games to make finals. So they're going very well at the moment. Geelong, they've lost 3 in a row. They need to start finding some wins again, but it's certainly not panic stations just yet for the Geelong Cats. Game 2 of the weekend was Friday night at the SCG. Sydney Carlton. This was probably on paper looking like match of the round. Didn't end up being that way. Sydney absolutely destroyed them. They won 17-15, 117 to 9-11-65. So Sydney scored more than their average and conceded right on their average, and they're the best attacking team and the best defensive team in the league. So to outscore that is a very impressive effort, especially against a team as rated as highly as Carlton. But they dropped to 6-4, so all of a sudden their season's looking a little bit tougher for them. They obviously were way below their average points for and way below their average points against, so not the perfect night for Carlton. Craziest part of this game probably is the fact that Carlton kicked the first 4 goals and 5 of the first 6, and then from that point on it was an absolute demolition job from Sydney. Their midfield is absolutely dominant, and it's hard to see where they're going to lose while their team is cruising like this. Both teams kicked it more than typically they do. Whether that's, I don't know. I think it's interesting because Sydney bought a lot of pressure, and a couple of weeks ago when Carlton played Collingwood and Collingwood bought the pressure, Carlton tried to handball their way out of it and overpossess it a bit, whereas this time they didn't really overpossess it so much, but it still didn't work for them. So back to the drawing board for them and how they handle teams that are bringing that full pressure. What's the major stats in this game? Sydney dominated the tackle count, which we kind of expect. Sydney are ranked 3rd in the league, whereas Carlton are 11th. You don't like to be a team that has less of the ball and also loses the tackle count, but that was the case here for Carlton. Both teams, what else is there? Clearances were very level, 39 to Sydney, 35 to Carlton, which probably kind of close to what we would expect for these two teams. Neither of them are dominant from clearances, even though Sydney obviously have a very good midfield. But they tend to lose the clearance. Not always, but they don't dominate clearances, but then they just bring that intense pressure. Therefore, their midfielders work hard forward and run the ball and get on the back of them and kick goals. Yeah, that's how this game was probably run and won. Sydney's just elite pressure, got the ball turned over and ran the ball, kicked the goals from their midfielders who tend to kick goals every week. Best players, Chad Warner was probably best on. He had 28 touches, 3 goals. He's having a great season, but especially the last couple of weeks he's been outstanding. Goulden was good on a wing. He had 28 touches. Isaac Heaney continued his outstanding season so far. He had 24 touches and 3 goals. Grundy was awesome in the ruck. Just the whole Sydney team really were very good. Meanwhile, Carlton, Nick Newman had 32 touches. He was pretty solid. Outside of him, I don't know if there was too much to write about. They were comprehensively beaten in most facets of this match, in my opinion. Where teams go from here, Sydney are flying. They've got no issues. They are probably going to drop a game at some point. For their sake, they'll be hoping that they stay relatively injury free. Yeah, they've had some long term injuries that haven't even played yet this year, like Callum Mills. But while their midfield is staying healthy and fit, it's hard to see them losing. Carlton, their season is just starting to not look so good. They've only won 2 out of their last 6 games after starting dominant and looking in control of their season. They obviously were looking good, but it's not doom and gloom for them. They're still 6-4. They're above 500 for the year, which is a solid spot. But this does drop them outside of the 8, and they do need to find form. There's no doubt about it. Their ability to finish games off is a massive concern. I think they've lost 4 of their last 5 last quarters. 3 weeks in a row, I think this is. They've led by 4 goals in the first quarter, or thereabouts 4 goals in the first quarter, and not gone on to win. So they do have some issues, but they're certainly capable of turning it around. They have some very good players, so it's not the end of the road for them. It's May. What's the date today? 20th of May. There's a long way to go, but they certainly need to find a way to turn their season around a little bit. On Saturday afternoon, we went to the MCG for Collingwood and Adelaide, and these two teams just seem to play absolute nail biters time and time again. Both games last year were under a kick. The last one of 2022 was under a kick, and now the first one of 2024 is under a kick. Unbelievable scenes, really. Collingwood win this one 12-6-78 to Adelaide's 11-8-74. Collingwood kicked away a little bit in the second quarter. They looked like they were going to take control of the match, but then the second half of the second quarter, and then especially the last quarter, Adelaide just dominated ground position for long periods, but just couldn't convert it into goals. And then Collingwood made use of their one real chance in the last quarter, which was a Jordan De Goey goal with a minute 20 to go to put them back in front. If we look at the stats from the game, obviously it wasn't a high scoring game, but it's kind of what you expect for an Adelaide game, especially. Like their points for and against is around that 77-78 mark, which is what this game was. A little bit lower scoring for Collingwood than usual, but probably expected against Adelaide. Kick to handball ratios, Collingwood was smack on their normal. Adelaide handballed it more than they usually do, which was interesting because, they played well. Maybe that's how they play their best footy, and they just haven't been able to do that so much this year. Tackle count was dead level, 68 apiece, which is a little surprising based on what we've seen this year. Collingwood obviously the number 1 tackling team in terms of tackling differential, whereas Adelaide are ranked 13th going into this game. So to break even with Collingwood was a massive result for them. Both teams had similar amount of shots. Collingwood had slightly more, just missed a couple completely. Clearances, Collingwood actually have turned that around maybe in the last 2 or 3 weeks. They win the clearance battle by +8, which Adelaide aren't known for their clearance work either, but if you go back to Anzac Day, up until Anzac Day, Collingwood really struggled in the clearance department. They got absolutely smacked by Essendon in that regard on Anzac Day, but since then they've really turned it around and starting to show, I guess, that they can win the ball from the clearances. Inside 50s +9 for Adelaide. As I said, that was mainly in that last quarter and the second half of the second quarter. They just absolutely controlled ground position and built up pressure, but just were unable to convert it into goals. So +9 for Adelaide is a pretty big margin in inside 50s to lose the game. And not something that they do too often is win inside 50s. as you can see, they're typically over the course of the year, they're minus 0.78 per game. So Adelaide had some massive positives in this game, but they just couldn't quite convert it into a win. Best players, Nick Dacos had 41 touches and got the goal assist for the winning goal. He turned it over a bit, but he also had 14 clearances. He had a lot of contested ball, so he was very good. Scott Pendlebury, especially in the first quarter, he was dominant. He had 30 touches, 2 goals, couple goal assists as well. He was huge all around the ground. Josh Dacos, he had 30 touches, he was good. Johnny Noble in his 100th was good. De Goey kicked a couple goals, including, as I said, the game winner with a minute to go. For Adelaide, Rankin was clearly their best player. He was outstanding. Unfortunately, he did his hammy right at the end. So that's a bit disappointing for him and for Adelaide, but he was outstanding with 30 touches. Kicked a dribble goal to put him in front with 7 minutes to go. He was very good. Matt Crouch had a lot of it, 34 touches. Dawson had 29 touches. Just some really good performances from both teams, really. And in the end, Adelaide just go down in this one. So that's looking at that. This puts Collingwood firmly in the 8. I think 5th on the ladder now. After starting 0-3, that's they'll be very happy with what they've done to turn this season around. They're not dominant performances in games, but all you can do in the end is get 4 points, and that's what they did in this one. Adelaide, their season started terribly as well. They were 0-3. They have completely turned their season around, but games like this don't help. When you've had a bad start to the year, you can't be giving these ones away where you're losing by a goal. This is at least their second loss by under a goal, but I think it might be third. They definitely lost this one. They lost to the Bombers by less than a kick. I think they lost to the Gold Coast also by less than a kick, or around about a kick. So those sort of results are kind of pushing Adelaide towards probably missing the 8 based on that, whereas their best football is clearly good enough to be in that top 8. I had high hopes for them this season, and they kind of fallen a little bit short at times, but their last month to 5-6 weeks has been very good. As you can see, they're now 3 wins, 2 losses and a draw from their last 6, which that could quite easily be. They had the draw as well, so that's basically it's a half a win. That's like they could well be 6 wins from 6 matches in the last 6 weeks. Both losses were under a kick, and they had the draw, so they're certainly improving, and certainly wouldn't write them off from finals yet, but they do need to start winning these games. To only have 3 wins from 10 matches makes it tough, but there's no reason why they can't, in the back half of the season, turn it around and start winning these sort of games. We then went up to Sydney at NG Stadium. We had GWS versus the Bulldogs, which, as far as the GWS go, this is one of their bigger rival teams, based on the fact that they played a couple games, final games against each other. A little bit of bad blood, but nothing too serious. And the Doggies just got it done. 8 goals, 22-70 to GWS 6-7, 43. Obviously, pretty horrible kicking. 8 goals, 22. It's not ideal. It was wet, though, so you kind of expect a little bit of that, but this is probably a bit more than you would want as a Bulldog supporter. But they're flying all of a sudden. 3 weeks ago, everyone was calling for Luke Beveridge's head, and now all of a sudden they've won a few in a row and things are flying for them. So, doggies are cruising. Meanwhile, GWS, all of a sudden, their seasons are falling apart a bit like Carlton's, very similar to Carlton's season so far. They're still 6-4. They're still firmly just in the. I think they're just in the 8. They might be 8th or 9th. But they need to start winning some games because they've certainly lost a few over the last few weeks. And to lose at home would not be what they were hoping for here. First, both teams are very reliant on running and handballing games, and that's what you're going to get in the wet. So you wouldn't think that either team would be really advantaged or disadvantaged, and by the fact that it was a bit of a wet game. They both played similar games to their normal game style, so they weren't affected in that regard. GWS tackled really well, plus 24, but it just didn't convert to turning the ball over anywhere near as much as they probably would have liked. A key stat here is GWS had 67 clangers in the game, whereas Bulldogs only had 44. In wet weather footy, to only have 44 clangers is a great effort from the Bulldogs. What else? Clearances. Bulldogs won that plus 8, which GWS are not well known for their clearance game. Tom Green obviously is very good in clearances, but outside of him, they don't really put up great numbers. Inside 50s, Bulldogs plus 20. That is a domination in the wet. Once again, GWS don't rely on dominating inside 50s. They rely on their team being very good once they get it inside 50. But they certainly wouldn't want to be losing inside 50 count by 20. Bulldogs are very good at getting it inside 50 and also very good at getting it scores once they get it inside 50. Obviously, you don't read too much into the scoreboard as such. Wet weather game, it's going to be lower scoring than normal. And, Bulldogs still had plenty of shots. They had, 8 goals, 22. That's 30 shots in a match. You kick 15-15, they get their score to 105, and all of a sudden it's looking a really good scoreline for them, but they did enough to win the game still, even with their poor kicking in front of goal, and that's the main thing that you can take from it for them. Best players, Treloar's been putting up some massive numbers this year. He's been very good. 35 touches, 6 clearances. He was very good. He's been good all year. He hasn't been turning it over too much. He's been getting a lot of the ball. He's been very good. Ed Richards was good with 27 touches, 10 clearances. Outside of them, it was just a well-rounded performance. Bont was a bit down on his usual performance. That's everyone on Bulldogs team pretty much did their role, and they got the reward for that. GWS, Lockie Whitfield bounced back with a bit more of the ball. He struggled the last couple of weeks being shut down, but still wasn't as damaging as he perhaps could be. Himmelberg was very good down back. Tom Green was solid. Interesting to note that GWS only managed 2 goal scorers in this game. Toby Green kicked 3 and Jesse Hogan kicked the other 3. So not too often are you going to win a game of football when you only have 2 goal scorers. Yes, it's wet weather footy, it's a low scoring game, but still. You want a little bit more variety on who's kicking goals than just 2 players. So that puts GWS just in a little bit of a slump at the moment. They need to turn that around, whereas the Bulldogs, they turned their season around. They got back to 5-5. They're still just outside the 8, but they're certainly trending in the right direction, and their best football is very good to watch. And I personally think their best football is good enough to be a top 4 team. They just need to work out to get rid of their bad football, because their bad football can be very costly for them. Next game up was the first one on Saturday night, which was St Kilda Fremantle at Marvel Stadium. Fremantle came to Melbourne and got the win, which is huge for them. They don't get a huge amount of wins in Melbourne, but they did get this one. They kicked 9 goals, 18, so another team that was very inaccurate in front of goal, but another team that got away with it this weekend, whereas previous weekends, teams kicking inaccurately has cost games. So they kicked 9-18-72. St Kilda only managed 8-7-55. Yeah, Fremantle kind of were in control of this game the whole way, but only just. Like, it was pretty close. Obviously, they wasted opportunities. They managed to kick a couple goals late in that fourth quarter to extend the lead a little bit. And yeah, they win the game. Two contrasting styles in typical usual play and also in this one. Obviously, Fremantle are a heavy handball team. Sarong, Fife, all of them do love to get plenty of handballs. Whereas St Kilda are a lot more direct. They kick it long. They move the ball with kicking instead of the run and handball that you see from the Fremantle, the GWS and the Bulldogs. And that's how this game played. Two completely different styles. Fremantle just typically use their run and handball game, and St Kilda a bit slower, a lot more direct with just kicking long. St Kilda's season is drifting away quite quickly. They're 1-5 over the last 6 weeks, and to be honest, they haven't really had a good performance since round 2 when they beat Collingwood, in my opinion at least. Tackle count, Fremantle dominated this, plus 21, which they are typically a lot better than St Kilda, and that's a major issue, I think, for St Kilda. Their lack of pressure and tackle pressure is a concern for me. The scoring shots were dominated, obviously, by Fremantle. They kicked poorly, but they certainly had a lot more opportunities in front of goal. Clearances, plus 17 for Fremantle, which, once again, I would 100% expect. Even though St Kilda are pretty solid at the clearance game, Fremantle are absolutely dominant in there, week in, week out. They are the best clearance team in the game, in my opinion. They did kind of not dominate Sydney the week before, but, I mean, Sydney are a very good team, and also it was a tough weekend for them, so I think you can kind of just ignore that result. Inside 50s was a little bit closer. Fremantle only won that by 8. But for Fremantle to beat any team in inside 50 count is very strange, and not a surprise that if they do, they would win a game, because they tend to win quite a few games when losing the inside 50 count. Best players, we'll start with Fremantle. Sarong, he's had a great season. He's going to be in contention for the Brownlow. He's going to have a bit of work to do to catch up to Heaney, but he's certainly playing some good football. He had 30 touches. Jordan Clark was good, 29. Ryan was good, 27. Goal kickers, they only had 2 multiple goal scorers in Amiss and O'Meara. Fremantle, just across the board, really good game from them. Luke Jackson in the ruck was very solid. He had 10 clearances, 39 hit-outs. Is a very good game. For St Kilda, their ruckman was probably the best player for them by far, in my opinion. He had 31 touches, which for a ruckman is insane. He had 39 hit-outs. He had 9 tackles, 7 inside 50s, 8 clearances. He was just huge all round. Outside of him, I don't think anyone was outstanding for them. Nobody to really write home about. They, in my opinion, were comprehensively beaten, and the scoreboard shows that. Going forward, St Kilda, their season's getting away from them very quick. It's hard to see them from 3-7 in their current form, being a team that's going to be able to push for finals, and they are very much in danger of dropping down to being a bottom 4 team. At the moment, you'd have to say Hawthorn might be playing better football than them. West Coast are probably playing better football than them as well, so that puts them right down the bottom with Richmond and North Melbourne. They're definitely above both of those teams, but I don't see any other team that's currently going worse than St Kilda other than those 2 teams. Fremantle, their season is looking fine. They're 6-4. They head back to Optus Stadium this weekend for a massive game against Collingwood. If they win that, then all of a sudden they're 7-4. They're firmly in the top 8, and they can kind of springboard to the end of the season. Their one down point was obviously the fact that they got comprehensively beaten by the Eagles in the derby a few weeks back, but that's a distant memory now. Their season, if they build from what they've done, certainly this week, their season's in good shape. The other Saturday night game was one of the worst games of football you'll ever watch. Brisbane bounced back into form. They needed it big time, obviously coming off the draw the week before. Richmond, their season, they've got the excuse of injuries. They're playing nowhere near a team that they would have been expecting to be putting out on the field this year. But you can only play with what you've got, and their last couple of weeks have been atrocious. Brisbane kicked 26-7, 163 to Richmond's 6-8-44, which, funnily enough, is the exact score line from the 2007 grand final when Geelong beat Port Adelaide by 119 points. Just a little random stat for you. Domination in every facet of this match from Brisbane. They're the number one kick to handball team in the league, and they absolutely showed that here. They had 274 kicks to 107 handballs, which is insane ratio of 2.56 kicks per handball. Almost 100 more disposals, 98 extra marks. Richmond got more tackles, but Richmond never had the ball for Brisbane to tackle them. 26 goals to 6, scoring shots 33 to 14. Clearances were level, 35 to 36 in Richmond's favour. So Brisbane, who typically are okay in clearances, got beaten, which is a bit strange because Richmond are horrible at clearance game. Inside 50s though, 60 to 40, so plus 20. Brisbane have dominated inside 50 counts pretty much all season long, so no surprise there. The game was over 5 minutes into the game, and it just continued. So Richmond's last 2 weeks, they've lost by 91 points to the Bulldogs, and now they've lost by 119 to Brisbane. Their season is long gone, and a distant memory that they beat Sydney in round 3 or 4, whatever week that was, 3 I think. Crazy times. Best players, you could do a list of freaking the whole Brisbane team basically here. Lachie Neale had 36 touches, had 6 goal assists, 9 inside 50s. He was massive. Dane Zorko, he's continued his fine form. He's been really good, all but maybe one game this year. He had 35 touches. Goal kickers, obviously they kicked a lot of goals. Second team this weekend to kick 26. Charlie Cameron, he had his best game probably for the year. He needed it. He kicked 5. Lohman also kicked 5. Then Danaher and Rayner kicked 3 each. So their whole team was really good. There's nobody on their team that you could say they didn't really do their job. When you win by 119, it's hard to be too critical of anyone. Whereas Richmond, they were just chasing tails all day long. There's no one really here that you could say did an outstanding job. They had Cumberland was the only multiple goal scorer. He kicked 2. Rioli had the most touches with 25, but you're not really talking about any individuals for the Richmond team because they just were so far off the pace all night long. We move on to the Sunday games. First up, we have Essendon v North Melbourne. This was a marvel on Sunday. Essendon took the win comfortably in the end. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but they kicked 16-10, a 106 to North Melbourne's 10-66. At half time, the margin was only 7 points, and Essendon were probably in control at that point, but North Melbourne were giving them a little bit of a fright. But then Essendon came out in the third quarter and kicked 8-2 and kind of put the game to bed very quickly. That was late in the in the third quarter, where they really turned it on and kicked some quick goals. It's kind of what Essendon have been good at this year, is just able to flip the switch and really put teams to bed in short periods of time. Both teams very similar to their typical game style. North Melbourne probably kicked it a little bit more and handballed a little less than their usual style, but they were very good. Well, not good, but they were even in that regard. Tackles, Essendon have really, really been good at tackling all year long. They were plus 14, whereas North Melbourne, not that surprisingly, have not been great at tackling. Plus 10 scoring shots for Essendon kind of tells you that they were dominant enough in that regard. A little bit of an area of concern over the last couple of weeks, especially after, as I said with Collingwood, Essendon absolutely dominated the clearances on Anzac Day. Somehow they lose the clearance count by 14 to the Kangaroos. I guess you kind of just write it off and be like, doesn't really matter, it doesn't mean too much in this game. It's just very surprising because Essendon are ranked number 2 going into this week, and North Melbourne are obviously 14th. So that's just a really surprising number, I think. Probably not anything really to be too concerned about, but Essendon's last few weeks, maybe that's an area where they haven't focused too much on, and maybe they will look at that over the coming weeks. Inside 50s plus 23 for Essendon, and no surprise there. They absolutely demolished North Melbourne at getting the ball forward. Conversion rates were pretty similar once getting it in. Both teams, were at similar efficiency rates for both scoring and for goal scoring, so nothing too exciting in those two numbers. Best players, Essendon were pretty even across the board. They had plenty of good players. 2 metre Peter kicked 4 goals. He was good up forward. Guelphy, he kicked 3, so his form's really going well. He kicked 3 the week before against GWS, so he's going well. Martin, he had 27 touches. He was good. McGrath, Caldwell, they all were just very even across the board, I think, in many regards. It was a good team performance, I think, from the Essendon Football Club. And then for North Melbourne, I don't know what to say about these guys. It's the young guys typically that are good. Shees will have 32 touches, but they tend to be very uncontested touches. Luke Davies-Yanaki was good. They didn't really have anyone kick multiple. They had only Luke Davies-Yanaki kicked 2 goals. Everyone else was single goal scorers. Overall, they're just a fair way off being able to really push a team. They're still looking for their first win of the season, and at the moment it's hard to see where that's coming. Essendon, meanwhile, their season is flying. That jumps them up to second on the ladder, and all of a sudden things are cruising for them. They'll be very happy with where they're at. That's where they're at. They're flying. They've got a couple of not so tough weeks in the next few weeks, so you'd probably expect them to still be in the top 2, just behind Sydney, probably after round 12 or 13. The second half of the season, they have some tougher opponents, so we'll see how they go once that happens. And I keep going back to it. They certainly are a better team than they were last year, but they were 5th on the ladder after round 17 last year, so there's every chance that if injuries hit or something, that their season would spiral very quickly. At the moment, though, they're playing very good football, and it's hard to see a world where they don't make finals this year. They're certainly playing some good football. Second last game of the week, and this was probably one of the biggest robberies in AFL football you'll see. Not saying that Port Adelaide didn't deserve it or Hawthorn didn't deserve it, but all day long Hawthorn were comfortably in front. 5 goals up at quarter time, 4 goals up at half time, almost 5 goals up at 3/4 time, and then somehow they fall apart and lose, including conceding 2 goals in 22 seconds to lose the game. Not too often are you 11 points up with 25 seconds to play and then lose. Like, that's an unbelievable finish. Great goal from Rioli, and then another great goal by Burn-Jones to put Port Adelaide in front with 2 seconds to go. So final score was Port Adelaide 11-14-80, plays Hawthorn 12-7-79. Look at the stats. Both teams played probably similar-ish to how they normally do. Port Adelaide probably handballed slightly more than they usually do, but no major difference to their normal game. Tackle count was massive. It was damp game, which tends to mean a high tackle count, but 96 tackles for Port Adelaide is a huge number. They typically are good at tackling, whereas Hawthorn aren't, so plus 16 is no real surprise there. Scoring shots, Port Adelaide obviously had a lot more with their inaccuracy, but they got the job done, so it didn't cost them like it kind of has in previous weeks. The clearances, Hawthorn won, which they don't win the clearance count too often, so pretty big achievement to beat one of the stronger teams in clearances. They won that 43-39. Inside 50s were dead even at 48. So you'd suggest that it's probably a game where both teams were very, very even in many regards. And I mean, it was a 1 point margin in the end. Hawthorn, though, will be absolutely kicking themselves for this one. They looked like they were going to go to 4 and 6, and all of a sudden be right there with teams that are just outside the 8. But they kind of fall apart in that last quarter. Didn't manage to kick a goal, whereas Port Adelaide kicked 4. So Port Adelaide get the win. They needed that win. In my opinion, they desperately needed that. If they had lost that, it's not the end of the world, but they would have been right back with GWS Carlton and their season not in disarray, but just losing games that they shouldn't be. But they get the win. That's all that they needed in the end, and they moved to 7 and 3 and sitting in the top 4. So they're cruising along now. They get out of jail with that one. They steal the match and they get the 4 points. Hawthorn, they're doing better than most people expected, including kind of me. They did show good signs late last year, and this year they're doing it again. We're not late in the season yet, but they've had some bad performances, but with a very young team, you kind of expect that. But they've certainly turned it around and showed some good signs this year. Best players, Zach Butters is outstanding here, 32 touches, Horn Francis has been good this year. He's at 27 here and 2 goals. 3 goals to Dan Houston with 22 touches was great. Willie Rioli kicked 3. Darcy Burn-Jones kicked 2 for Hawthorn. 5 goals to Blake Hardwick. Him as a forward is very, very good. He had a big day at Adelaide Oval against Collingwood in gather round. He's had another big day at Adelaide Oval again, this time against Port Adelaide. He's kicked 5 this time. Interestingly, they did swing him back in that last quarter. Maybe they should have tried to win the game, but I'm not a coach. Not Sam Mitchell. He's obviously a much better coach than me, but it was a decision they made, and maybe that affected their result here. But Hardwick was their best player, 23 touches, 5 goals is an outstanding return. Amon was good. He will be remembered for that last moment where he fumbled the ball in a tackle, which allowed Burn-Jones to kick the winner. but he was good. Day was good, and D'Ambrosio is having a very good season. So yeah, that's the game number 8. The final game of the week was probably the biggest upset of the round. Granted, it was over in the West, so West Coast had home ground advantage, but somehow they managed to beat Melbourne, and Melbourne is another team that I don't know where they stand at the moment. And I mean, I'm not probably the only one. West Coast win this one 16-9, 105. They led all day to Melbourne's 10-10, 70. Just a kind of comfortable victory for them. At no point did Melbourne really challenge them. I mean, it was only like 10 or so points at half time, but reasonably comfortable win for the West Coast Eagles. They were plus 30 in disposals, so they definitely had more of the ball. They had a massive amount of marks, plus 50, which is huge. Did Melbourne overpossess it? Well, they had less of the ball, but they handballed a lot more than they usually do, which I just find very surprising that their game style would change that much for this match. Melbourne obviously typically are a team that runs the ball, yes, but they kick it and they move the ball directly. Like, still around the wings a bit, but like certainly moving the ball, always going forward. Whereas this one, they just handballed it a lot and didn't make much progress, in my opinion. That's how I saw it, at least. They only managed 36 inside 50s, which is a very, very low number. Granted, they're not a great getting the ball inside 50 team, but 36 is quite a low number. Whereas West Coast had 57, which is a very, very decent number, especially when you consider that you kept the other team so low. So outstanding performance from the West Coast Eagles here. Melbourne won the clearance game, which didn't really result in them doing much with it. Yeah, not much more to say. West Coast just were the better team on the night. They played up to stadium well. Melbourne just did not show up. Best players in this one, I have to mention Harley Reid. That guy's burst work is insane. If you don't, actually both goals were outstanding, but his goal from the centre clearance was very exciting for West Coast fans and AFL fans alike. It was outstanding. He had 21 and 2, which was a great game. Tim Kelly was good. He had 30 touches. The whole West Coast team really played well. Waterman returned. The G-Train the second, as I like to call him, kicked 5, returned in after missing the week before, and I think that equals him at the top of the Coleman. Man, I would love to see him win the Coleman. He's been very entertaining to watch this year, and just all aboard the Waterman train. Everyone's obviously talking about Harley Reid, who's been outstanding, don't get me wrong. He's been changed the whole football dynamic in West Coast this year, but Waterman has been outstanding as well. His ability he gets plenty of it, he wins the ball, he kicks goals, and who doesn't love watching that happen? So West Coast just down the field were all great players. Melbourne, I don't know what was going on there, but Clayton Oliver, was their leading touch getter with 26. But overall, they didn't really have anyone that was great. They all kind of just were below par, and in the end, they lose by 30 odd points, and they have to return to Melbourne with their tail between their legs a little bit, because they probably went over there expecting that they would probably win. So their season, all of a sudden, like Carlton, like GWS, almost like Port Adelaide, just petering out a little bit. They showed their best is good enough to beat good teams, but their worst is a little bit average, and it's a concern for them, in my opinion. West Coast, they're showing that when they have their players on the park, they can be very good. No Elliot Yeo still, which is an even better sign because, especially early season, he was the one thing holding their team together, whereas they get this win without him. So that's a big, big thing for West Coast. Their season, they're not going to be playing finals. I don't think anyone would expect that they would. But they're now 3-7. If they can end the season with 6 or 7 wins, probably around about 14th on the ladder, they'll take that as a massive success. With the development that they'll get through Harley Reid, through Waterman, through all these young players, next year they could be all of a sudden pushing for finals, and their rebuild looks a lot better and a lot quicker than maybe most people expected. So West Coast, massive positive signs. Melbourne, they're still probably top 2 or 3 Victorian teams this year. At the moment, it's hard to know who the top one is. There's Collingwood, Essendon, Melbourne, Geelong, probably the top 4 Victorian teams. Which one's on top? I don't know at the moment. Maybe Collingwood, based on the fact that they won the premiership last year and probably have the most upside. But at the moment it's nobody's catching Sydney, and performances like this from Melbourne and performances from Carlton and performances this weekend by GWS suggest that nobody's really putting much pressure on Sydney at the moment. They're just a fair way ahead of everyone. That is all 9 matches complete. That is my full wrap up of round 10 matches. We'll be back on Wednesday for episode number 26, which will be our round 11 preview. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you all. A lot of detail in this episode. We've chatted a lot. My throat and voice is dying quickly. Struggled a couple of times there through the middle, but we got through it. I appreciate you all for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Whether you're on YouTube or Spotify, whichever one you're watching or listening to this, give it a like, subscribe, and let me know who you think was the best player on the weekend in the comments. Also, don't forget to check me out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where I post Team of the Weeks. I post match reviews after every game instantly on TikTok, and also we have power rankings each and every Thursday going out on the socials. So don't forget to check them all out. As I said, next episode will be out on Wednesday night. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.